All right. Thank you very much for joining our discussion and presentations about banning conversion therapy. Equality Arizona and Freedom Oklahoma have joined up to present this town hall to share critical information for the LGBTQ community during the pandemic. Both of our organizations are the statewide LGBTQ advocacy and community organizing nonprofits in our respective states. It is our job to share information with you all about laws, policies, elections, and court cases that will either advance or harm LGBTQ equality.
Hi everyone, my name is Allie Shinn. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm the Executive Director of Freedom Oklahoma, and we're just absolutely thrilled to be hosting this town hall with our faves over at Equality Arizona and with all these beautiful people here today to talk about the critical subject of conversion therapy. You've seen the subject in the news a lot lately, and we're going to get to what's next for our movement here and talking with the experts about what we can do from here. But first, we want to just introduce our panel. Is going to include today Katrina Kalb, who is the program director with Free Mom Hugs, Troy Stevenson, the campaign manager at the Trevor Project, Casey Pick, who is our senior fellow for advocacy and government affairs at the Trevor Project, and Matthew Shurka, co-founder of the Born Perfect Project at the National Center for Lesbian Rights. And together, we have some of the foremost experts on this topic across the country, people who are working hard to ensure that our youth are protected from this harmful practice. And we're so honored to have all of you collected here today. Thank you for doing this. We're going to talk about what conversion therapy is and what your individual organizations are doing to combat this practice. And what attempts have been made to stymie those by those empowered to stymie our collective efforts and where we can go from here, take an honest assessment of where we are and what's next. And before we get started on that, I'm going to kick it back over to Sage to talk about how the town hall is going to go tonight.
All right, thank you, Allie. My name is Sage Malden. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am the Director of Policy at Equality Arizona, and I've got to say that I'm very proud to work every day on behalf of the LGBTQ community in Arizona. If you have any questions that you would like to ask during the town hall, please use the chat or Q&A function to type in your questions. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the panel discussion.
Before we get started with our panelists, I'd like to kick it over to Alexis, who's going to show us a video that Free Mom Hugs has brought for us this evening.
Seems we're having some issues with the audio.
Thanks for hanging in there with us, everybody who's watching. We're going to try and get this figured out, and if we can't in just a moment, we'll move on to the panel. It's okay with everybody. Let's go ahead and move on. And Katrina, maybe when we chat with you, you can talk a little bit about where folks can find this video on your website and elsewhere, and people can go and watch it on their own. We will, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Erin. We'll link this video so that you can hear, get a chance to see what Free Mom Hugs is doing. I've seen this video. It's incredible. When you're ready to cry, give it a watch. Katrina, we'll just chat with you for a little bit, and then we'll figure that out a little bit later. So, we were hoping that we were going to have this introductory video, and thank you for bearing with us during the technical challenges. But since we didn't have that, Katrina, can you tell us a little bit about what Free Mom Hugs is and what you all do?
Yes, absolutely. And the video will be on our website, but it's part of a Mama Bears documentary. And there's a website for that as well, mamabearsdoc. So you all can see that there, and that should be coming out next year. We're very excited about it. Free Mom Hugs was originally started here in Oklahoma by a handful of conservative moms of LGBTQ kids who went on the journey of when a child came out. They had a lot of teaching and a lot of belief systems that unfortunately a lot of people hold. But that being LGBTQ plus is a sin. And they walked that journey of research and study and science and put their children first and realized that that was misinformation at the least, and decided to create this group. They started to go to pride parades. Sarah Cunningham is the founder, and she went to a pride with a button that said Free Mom Hugs and started to hear stories from people young and older that had been rejected. Here in Oklahoma, and I know elsewhere, homelessness for youth is a tremendous problem. So many are told that this is the worst of sins, and to either get your kids emergency help in the form of conversion therapy, or some actually feel it's appropriate to kick their kids out. And so Sarah began to hear those horror stories of people that had not been hugged, who were homeless or living in cars, and decided to gather friends together and figure out ways to help. And it started off small with, bus passes and gas cards and helping with groceries, and has now become a movement. And what we like to say is it's just a loving presence. We excuse me, we step in where others step out, unfortunately. And so that's the goal of Free Mom Hugs. And right now we are a national nonprofit, and we have chapters in every state. When there is not a pandemic, we are at all LGBTQ events that we can be. We're at pride festivals and drag queen story hours, fundraisers. We are everywhere that policies are that affect the LGBTQ community. So if there's a lobby day or a presentation about conversion therapy, we want to be there, show our faces, and show our shirts that say Free Mom Hugs. And those are kind of the billboard of what we stand for. And so people know that we're a safe place for them. And right now we just continue to educate and advocate the best that we can. And the mission of Free Mom Hugs is to empower the world to celebrate the LGBTQIA plus community through visibility, conversation, and education. And we've just seen that those are the most powerful tools that we have. We are not experts, and we typically point to the Troys and the Caseys to be experts. But we love to be that connection, and we love to be that safe place. And we've changed, we hope, many minds to go beyond being affirming and to actually celebrate if they have an LGBTQ person in their family. So that's our goal, and that's our purpose. And we're grateful that we're still going strong. And with people like this on the panel, the hope is one day to not need Free Mom Hugs anymore. So we'll see how quickly we can get there.
We love that, Katrina. Thank you. We're seeing a lot of love for Free Mom Hugs from commenters who are watching this, and that's always so lovely to see your work affirmed in that way. Yeah. You said so many things that I really love, but the part of your mission statement that always gets to me is to empower the world to be this way, right? And the part of your work that always speaks to me is that a lot of folks who put their children in harm's way in this way believe that they're doing the right thing. And we have so much work to do to get the world to a place where parents can understand that when a child comes out to them in some way, they actually should respond, right? And the best way to love their children. And I think Free Mom Hugs is doing a lot of great work, especially in conservative places, like Arizona and Oklahoma, on pushing back against narratives that have been so harmful for so long. Thank you for what you do. Before we get into the next couple questions, I want to give our viewers just a little bit of a content warning. We are going to talk a little bit about what conversion therapy means and looks like. We're going to jump back in after that to policy. So if you need to take a break from this in any way, that's totally okay to step out and take care of yourself. But with that in mind, Katrina, can you tell us a little bit about your understanding of what conversion therapy is and how it's practiced?
Yes, and I actually am a conversion therapy survivor. So I have a story that is common, but it is not all inclusive. My story is not the same as everyone's. So I'll just speak from my own. And conversion therapy at its core is a practice that attempts to change someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. And it is unfortunately a common belief that this is possible. It is not scientific. And now we are fortunate to have data that shows the damage that it does, and that it is not productive in any way. It is not successful in any way, and does definitely more harm than good. But the practice itself can vary in degrees. And I am someone, some people, when they think of conversion therapy, go to the extreme example, which does exist, and that can be shock therapy and other forms of negative connection to people to try to get them to, in a sense, be repulsed by their own urges and desires. But conversion therapy, in my opinion, is also as simple as someone praying the gay away and going forward at church and having folks lay hands on you with the message that there's something shameful that needs to be healed and gotten rid of. And so there's varying degrees of that, and different churches, different what are called ministries. At Free Mom Hugs, we call them shame-based ministries that speak that message and teach that message that there is shame involved in your sexuality or gender identity, and it's something that should be fixed. And then the lie that accompanies it is that it can be fixed. And when both of those things don't occur, and that's, my story, is the frustration in trying to get help and trying to get fixed, and the continuing problem that I kept dealing with being gay. And there was a lot of shame in that, and a lot of failure in that, and the damage that that does to your mental health is long going. And so in that, this is definitely one of many reasons why these discussions are so important, and the bills that are being written and need to be passed are so important.
Thanks, Katrina. And I'm always so inspired by how willing you are to share so openly about your story, in the hopes that other people can really learn and grow from your experience. We're going to move on here in just a moment, but just real briefly, can you tell us, what would you want young LGBTQ two-spirit folks to know when they're coming out, when they're struggling with who they are? What have you learned that you would want to say to them?
I think more than anything, even just like our mission, that they are a gift, that they're meant to be celebrated. They're a unique part of society that has its place and has its purpose, just like everyone else. And I think that, understanding that those that disagree or disapprove are misinformed. And that's the challenge, and that's the battle is, we are taught at a very young age to worship authority, to worship church leaders, pastors, teachers, doctors, and our parents. And if we're receiving this information from all parts of society, even, in the 80s is when I was growing up, and there were a lot of messages on TV that went along with the rest of the message that you heard from authority figures. And I think now, luckily, we're changing that social norm. We're changing that messaging. But there still is so much work to be done, especially in churches in America. One thing that we say is, the message won't change until we change the message coming out of the church. And there's a big progress that we still need to make. And I just ask, all of those in the LGBTQ two-spirit spectrum to even take the time to just study and learn on your own. That's brought so much healing to me too, of, learn about yourself and not be dependent on what other people are saying that is critical. But find that information out and see where you are gifted and meant to be here.
Thank you so much, Katrina. Stick around with us. I'm sure that folks are going to have questions for you, and we want to get to questions from our viewers soon. I'm going to kick it over to Troy for a little bit, though. Troy Stevenson with the Trevor Project. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Troy, can you just tell us a little bit about Trevor Project and specifically the 50 Bills and 50 States project that you're working on?
Of course. Thank you. Thank you to Equality Arizona and Freedom Oklahoma for having us. This is it's always great to work with great people in places around the country. The Trevor Project is the world's largest LGBTQ suicide prevention organization for youth. We have 24/7 talk, text, and chat. We've been around for 20 years answering calls from queer youth in crisis. And it's a unique position in the LGBTQ rights movement. So we are 50 Bills, 50 States, or 50 Bills, 50 States is a campaign within the Trevor Project that advocates, along with our friends at Born Perfect and NCLR and the Human Rights Campaign, and PFLAG actually is a big part of it as well, to introduce and pass legislation in all 50 states and municipalities around the country. So our coalition of organizations works in I believe we're in 30 states right now that we're working in collectively and together to advance protections for queer youth against conversion therapy. And we've got 20 states so far have passed it, and I believe, Matthew and Casey, it's 85 municipalities so far and counting quickly that have protected youth from this. So that's what we do every day. We work as a collective movement of organizations with not just the national organizations, but dozens and dozens of statewide groups and local municipal groups and community centers, just like Freedom Oklahoma and Equality Arizona. And so that's what we do every day, as well as tremendous amounts of research. So a lot of the research that's out there between the Trevor Project and the Williams Institute, UCLA, and others have gone a long way towards showing lawmakers and thought leaders and others exactly what the harms and the damages of conversion therapy are. And I know that Casey and Matthew will have a lot more to say on that subject.
Thank you, Troy, and I know we'll hear a lot from them too. It's so exciting to hear about this. We love working with you all in Oklahoma. I know in Arizona, folks have worked with you too, and it's just incredibly important that you're taking such a wide approach to this work and understanding that this is something that is harmful to our kids in all 50 states and municipalities across the country, and because of that, the fight should be in all 50 states and in municipalities across the country. Thank you for your work on that. Can you tell me a little bit about like what progress you've seen through these campaigns? I know you've talked about like where you've had victories, but maybe some lessons learned over the course of your work with this project.
Of course. And even before this project, I've been working on conversion therapy since 2013. And I know folks in California were working on it in 2012. One of Matthew's colleagues, Shannon Mentor, has been working on this for decades before anybody else was talking about it. In 2012, California passed the first protections from so-called conversion therapy in the country, and I was actually the executive director of Garden State Equality in New Jersey, and we did it the following year. And if you think about that, in 2012, there were just no protections anywhere. People didn't believe this was happening. It was a practice that was relatively underground, and through these pieces of legislation, in less than a decade, in 8 years, we have collectively as a movement not ended. We have created protections through legislation and regulation in 20 states and 85 municipalities. And on top of that work to change the law, to protect youth through litigation and legislation, there's a massive amount of public education, which is what is really vital in places like Oklahoma and Arizona right now. It's passing these laws in every state creates this public education in states that aren't yet in a place where they can pass them. So letting parents know that this is harmful, this is not okay, letting lawmakers and clergy and doctors and folks know what this actually does to young people and what it does to adults for that matter, it is so harmful and so dangerous that is a vital part of this movement, not just the legislative change, but the changing hearts and minds, the changing opinions at every level. And I know amazing work is going on right now in Oklahoma and Arizona to do just that, with an aim of getting to a point where even in so-called red states, so-called conservative states, we can begin to not only educate the public, but begin to actually create these protections in places. And we're creating. I know that in both your organizations, you're creating, mapping out power, creating the power of people to advocate for themselves and for their community and for those that don't have a voice. And that's the real progress on top of what can be done through the law. It's what can be done to let people know how to change, not just how to legally change, but how to end this practice, because it will never truly end through litigation or legislation. You're never going to be able to get people to quit doing this underground practice until we educate the public on how dangerous it is and how harmful it is. And that's what really changes everything, is making sure that society changes, not just the law.
Yeah, that's totally right, Troy. And I think that that's a really good kind of rallying cry for folks in our communities and folks in our organizations who are just really going through so much effort and putting themselves on the line for advocacy, and can feel so disappointed by how slow moving it is. But thank you for reminding us all that absolutely every action that we take matters and is world changing, is important to protecting LGBTQ people and our families. I want to just ask, real briefly before we move on to Sage, what are the next steps to ban conversion therapy in the United States? Like, what is the thing that people should have their eye on?
They should have their eye on everything, never stopping. I mean, the next steps are, once again, that public education, but also the introduction of this legislation in the 30 states that are left, and the work towards being able to introduce this legislation in those states that haven't done it yet, and the work towards passing it. But also watch what happens in regulatory change. And we've just gotten massive progress in North Dakota, of all places, where they've been able to move regulatory processes through their boards, and that happened in Utah, where the legislation stalled a bit, so stepped up and created regulatory change. It happened in Virginia ahead of statewide legislation, where regulations were changed first. There's federal legislation to stop Medicaid and Medicare. Well, I doubt Medicare would actually be paying this, but Medicaid from paying for conversion therapy, which, once again, that's a big educational piece that shows people how harmful it is and how to change it. So we've got lots of progress going on, and I know that we've got opportunity in especially Arizona in the coming year to see movement on the bill that's going through the legislature and potentially municipal ordinances. Just making sure that we're all paying close attention to what's going on in the courts and how to push back on some of that, and how to just keep the issue in the media. And I know that's one place that Allie and Freedom Oklahoma have done an amazing job on, that education piece, is keeping the earned media going around the harms of this and keeping people talking about it. I think that is, once again, the most important thing, is to keep talking about this issue. Keep letting people know that it's real. It's not gone away, and it hurts. And I think, once again, just every angle to elevate the issue and to make sure that these kids are protected is what we have to do. And that's, I know that's really broad, but I think those are the next steps.
Yeah, thanks for that, Troy. It's a good reminder that the work we do matters, and it's really important that we do it well, and that we have a lot of eyes on it. With that in mind, I want to point folks to some links that we have dropped in the chat here for websites for Free Mom Hugs and for the Trevor Project. We're going to get to hear a little bit more from the Trevor Project from Casey Pick, one of just the foremost experts on this topic, working to protect kids nationwide. I'm going to kick it over to Sage for that part of the programming.
All right, thank you, Allie. Casey, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. I know that you and I have spoken on several panels before in the past, and you're just a wealth of information. You're such a pleasure to learn with and from. That said, my first question for you is, what does research say about conversion therapy?
I appreciate that setup, which was a very gentle warning to folks that you're about to get a lot of statistics from me. I'm going to build off of what Katrina mentioned. We know that the research says that conversion therapy doesn't work. We know that it says that it's harmful. But I'm specifically going to call out that we've got recent research that tells us that conversion therapy is also still happening. It's still real. At the Trevor Project, our research department for the last 2 years has put out a national survey on LGBTQ youth mental health. It's a long survey. It asks a lot of questions about a lot of different things that affect our youth's mental health and well-being. But for purposes of today's conversation, I'm going to call out the data we've discovered about the practice of conversion therapy. The 2020 survey of 40,000 youth between the ages of 25 and 13 now found that 10% of them reported experiencing conversion therapy. That's right now. And the harm that is being done to these youth by the methods of conversion therapy used today is still abundantly evident. We found that those youth, those 10%, were 2.5 times more likely to report a suicide attempt in the last year. They were equally 2.5 times more likely to have multiple suicide attempts in the last year than their LGBT peers who had not experienced conversion therapy. Probably wouldn't surprise you to find out the communities that are at higher risk to be experiencing conversion therapy these days. It's going to be your youth with lower family income, youth from the South whose parents are inclined to say negative things about LGBTQ people. Sadly, youth who are Hispanic or Latinx, and youth who are transgender and non-binary. All of these populations showed in our data to be more likely to be experiencing conversion therapy these days. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. But what is important to take away from all of that, because I really recommend roll on over to the Trevor Project website and hit up our research and resources pages to be able to look at those data. But the takeaway from it is that conversion therapy is still real, it is still harmful, and it is still something that we really need to fight back on. But also important to take away is that we have abundant evidence of this harm. We've got the material and the ammunition we need to walk into lawmakers' offices and say something needs to change.
Yeah. Right. Thank you for that, Casey. Thank you for that important takeaway, but also thank you for contextualizing the data that you shared. It's very sobering. Okay, so the next question I have for you is, which professional organizations have discredited the practice of conversion therapy?
At this point, the question is which ones have not? And the answer to that is no serious medical or mental health organization in the United States has failed to condemn conversion therapy. The American Psychological Association, American Psychiatric Association, social workers, marriage and family therapists, all on down the line. I have a colleague who likes to say that it's every APA except the American Poodle Association. So this is something that has, based on evidence, based on decades of experience, all of these expert organizations have come out and said that conversion therapy does not work because, well, there's nothing to fix. A person's sexual orientation or gender identity it is the consensus opinion of the experts. This is not an activist thing. It's their consensus opinion that this is a normal part of the just human experience, that there are spectrums of how we experience gender, attraction, and sexuality.
Thank you again, Casey. Okay, so my last question for you is, what are the next steps to ban conversion therapy in the U.S.?
All right, so I suspect that my colleague and friend Matthew Shirka is going to talk a bit about some of what we've heard from the courts lately. But specifically, the one thing I want to call out, just given my love for data and evidence, is the fact that there's a court out there that suggests that there's not enough evidence of harm from conversion therapy. Now, that is nonsense. That's nonsense based on just listening to the truth of the stories of people like Matthew and Katrina. That's nonsense based off of the evidence from experts for decades and from the research that, like what Trevor has done. But the next step for us is really to get loud. It's to make sure that people know that we have this evidence and to get it out there and to talk about what that means, to make the numbers real. Sometimes that means giving it a face. This does not necessarily mean putting all of the burden on survivors. No, they need company, they need reinforcement. And that's where all of us have a story to tell. Whether you are somebody who is themselves a doctor or a psychologist, and you can talk from that kind of expertise and be able to share those stories. If you are a parent or a friend or a family member of an LGBT person, and you know how the constant pressure to change and be something else affected your friend or family member, and you can see how that affects and what that looks like, you have a story to tell and something that matters. And beyond all of that is just we can all make the case for what kind of society we want to live in. And that just comes down to, do you want to live in a society where people are allowed to be who they are or not? And that's part of why we all have a story to tell on this.
I love that, Casey. Thank you so much. Okay, so next up we have Matthew with the Born Perfect campaign. Matthew, I think this is the first time we've have actually shared a space, whether virtual or not, together. Now that we've had several phone conversations over the past few months, but something I want you to know, I have really admired the work that you have done since the Born Perfect campaign launched. When was that? 2012, 2013? Was it sooner than that?
No, that's right. We started in 2012 with the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and Born Perfect got its own name, or was coined, in 2014.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you so much for being here with us today. Okay, so my first question for you, Matthew, is what is the Born Perfect campaign?
Well, just by the way, I was going to say it's mutual, Sage. I appreciate it. What is the Born Perfect campaign? So I began volunteering with the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and our legal director, Shannon Minter, really was the individual who spearheaded this movement, starting taking on litigation cases in the early 90s. His first case was in 93, and there was just some, there was something real to actually take on here and holding therapists accountable. But culturally and socially, really no one had the confidence to bring any legislation forward. And so 2012 was the first bill that was introduced in California by the National Center for Lesbian Rights, which passed. And that really has become the model legislation in the country that we're seeing now. 107 enacted laws. Just so, as you heard so many numbers, like 85 ordinances in the 20 states. If we look at the total, it's about 107 laws have been enacted. since 2012, which is just incredible. We really haven't seen any LGBT cause move that quickly in such a short period of time. And so the Born Perfect campaign was created in 2014 just to give it its own name, its own identity. And it's been really powerful for me as a conversion therapy survivor myself. And not just watch all these laws pass and see elected officials get involved on both Republican and Democrats, but on both sides of the aisle, but also how year after year, more and more survivors came forward and started to share their stories. And these laws have not just educated the public, but also granted permission that these survivors do have a voice and they can come forward. And so, yeah, just to sum up, the Born Perfect campaign itself is a national campaign to pass legislation, bring on litigation, public education, and media with a common goal to end conversion therapy.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Matthew. So my next question is, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit. I was wondering if you can further elaborate a little bit more on it. The second question is, what progress have you seen through this campaign over the years?
Yeah. And I did touch upon it. I can go a step further. If you look at really how underground this issue was in 2012 to compare it to now, and Trevor Project and our other partners can agree to this, we get this common question of, conversion therapy really still happen? And even people in our community would still say that. And so something that's been completely underground to then elected officials discussing it in the public realm, to party platforms declaring during presidential elections, what their position is on conversion therapy, to the creation of the film Boy or Race, if you haven't seen it yet. This is tremendous progress in terms of law and culture. There is a conversation that exists today about conversion therapy that did not exist 8 years ago. And it goes beyond our borders. We have built such laws very similar to the language that we see here in the US, in Canada, in France, in the UK, in Israel, in Brazil, in Ecuador, in Malta, and the UN is involved. It's incredible. I know my next question is, and there's some, hardships to still encounter, but it has really been an amazing 8 years of progress.
Yeah, it definitely has. So yeah, you alluded to the next question. This has generated a lot of conversations and has caused a lot of worries throughout all 50 states. So this is the question: what was the recent ruling of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit on barring the enforcement of ordinances forbidding therapists from practicing conversion therapy? And does this ruling have any far-reaching implications? And Matthew, after you respond, I would like to invite Casey and Troy in to give your responses if you want.
Yeah, great. So just to share very briefly what happened in Florida, there were two local laws, one in Boca Raton and another one in Palm Beach County, that passed, which is great. Florida, just as a side note, Florida does have the most ordinances out of any state that we've worked in. And of course, these two, not of course, but Liberty Counsel, which has been known to go after such laws, challenged these two laws, representing two conversion therapists. And the district court denied their motion for preliminary injunction, basically saying Liberty's counsel claimed that this is not constitutional and that this law should be stopped immediately. And the court said, no, it's the law is sound, it's constitutional, there's no issue here. Then, of course, we went to the appellate court in the 11th Circuit, and this was a 3-judge panel. 2 of those judges were appointed by Trump, which I believe is important because this really shares an example of the landscape that we are now in, even though there's a new Biden administration, but the amount of judges that are going to that we all have to confront regarding conversion therapy. And so so the appellate basically gave it back to the district court and said, actually, we're going to go with the Conversion Therapy Council and say they have the right to preliminary injunction. and that they have to now go back to that court and have the case. Now so this is happening like live in the moment. So as of right now, nothing's happened yet. Meaning the laws that are passed are still in effect. The two judges that gave this ruling said that basically it's a violation of free speech and that it is unconstitutional. And this is really unprecedented for a federal judge to do regarding conversion therapy. And so what's happening today, literally today, the city of Boca Raton and Palm Beach County filed their petition for a rehearing in the 11th Circuit, which now all of us as organizations will get together and submit amicus briefs, like the Trevor Project, like us at Born Perfect, who will put all our research and everything you're hearing on this panel will go to the 11th Circuit, and hopefully we will be granted a rehearing. So just so, as I know this is a big question, whether has any laws been affected? As of right now, no. The worst case scenario is that that we don't get our hearing, the laws are taken down, and what that means is conversion therapy laws cannot be passed in the 11th Circuit, which is only specific to 3 states, which is Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. The likelihood of this going to the Supreme Court is really unlikely, and we want people to know that. The only way it can ever go there is, if the city of Boca Raton were to ask for it. And so this isn't good. Of course, this is the first time we've ever had such a reaction. I don't want to say reaction, but a ruling by a federal judge on this issue in such a way. And so, yeah, it's going to affect us. But yeah, please chime in, Casey and Troy, if you have anything please want to add about the 11th Circuit.
Sure. One of those things that, I don't really wave around too much is that I am an attorney, but now and then it comes in handy. So I'm going to go a little bit more just into what this court did and why that's weird and why that's really different from what we've seen elsewhere. So like Troy and Matthew mentioned, we've been passing these laws statewide and locally since 2012. And this is far from the first time they've been challenged in court. And in fact, they've historically survived and been upheld by the 3rd and 9th Circuit Federal Circuit Courts of Appeal. The 9th Circuit is absolutely massive. That's pretty much the western half of the country. The 3rd Circuit is over around New Jersey territory. That's kind of Troy's well aware of that space. And part of why those laws were upheld was because the courts there recognized that what we're regulating here is not speech. It's not prohibiting people talking about the idea of whether a sexual orientation or gender identity can or should be changed. It is the action. It is the process and treatment of therapy. And the recognition that, a medical treatment or practice, even if words are a part of it, is an action. It's a conduct. And in that way, that gets different treatment under our laws than ideas in the discussion and talking and what is really speech. So in this case, you've got these 2 judges who took what was a remarkably simplistic kind of view when it came to speech, saying, well, you have to talk to do this, so we're going to treat it like speech, basically. And it is important to note that there was actually a really strong dissent, even in this 3-judge panel, that was really calling this out and noting that, no, don't think I'm going to go with you there. So the Trevor Project, folks like Born Perfect and NCLR, I do think that it is important that we try to get the entire 11th Circuit to weigh in and to really take a more serious look at this. And I think there's a strong chance that they will. The question that we are really pushing them on, because when you ask a court to do a rehearing, it's not just, hey, can we get a do-over? You have to answer a question of why the court should look at it again. And one of those questions is, well, how serious is this issue? How important is this? And I know that Trevor is coming in and bringing along some of our other partners in the suicide prevention community to really weigh in and say, we've got all this evidence that say this is a life and death issue. And that's why the court needs to look at this again, because the government has a right to regulate conduct that threatens life and limb. in that it is really shocking to have a court go against centuries of American judicial history that say the government has a right and an obligation to protect citizens. And even in the case of, well, what about the fact that there are words involved? I'll close by mentioning that Supreme Court Justice Thomas, this is not anybody's liberal, is the one who called out specifically in a Supreme Court ruling this summer that, you know what, even if you are incidentally using speech to engage in conduct, the government still has the right to regulate that kind of medical practice. So I think this 11th Circuit ruling is just flat wrong, and we're going to keep fighting it.
Thank you, Casey. Okay, Matthew, my last question for you. What are the next steps to ban conversion therapy in the U.S.? What are those, in your opinion?
Okay, so we are all out. And really, like, we've never been, despite the 11th Circuit, we've never been in such a stronger position in terms of visibility, how many people know about conversion therapy. There's 107 enacted laws. That's the 20 states and 85 to 86 or so cities. And, it's just like, this is it. We have all the tools. So we are full steam ahead with passing legislation on the state level and ordinances. We have survivors coming forward and sharing their stories, and not just let me put that together. Survivors coming and sharing their stories in their locality is so powerful. It creates relatability and for people to learn that it is happening in your community. And it doesn't really matter if it's a big city or a small city or somewhere rural. Like, conversion therapy happens everywhere. At Born Perfect and NCR's legal team, administrative complaints. You, as a survivor, as that's you, any survivor of conversion therapy who can bring a complaint against their therapist who conducted conversion therapy on them in their state, you can call us. And it doesn't have to be just us. It can be any attorney in your locality can file that complaint with you. And that's, we've really taken on giving survivors the courage to actually come forward and feel safe in that process where they can actually be represented well and file administrative complaints. Then you can take it a step further and do a consumer fraud case and bring litigation against the conversion therapist as well. And that really, again, is holding them accountable for their actions. Another spin on that, we keep talking about how many laws we passed because it's really all the work. That's all of the work that everyone on this panel has done. But another way to look at conversion therapy from a consumer fraud perspective is that you can say, or it is, conversion therapy is already illegal nationwide on the basis of consumer fraud. Each state in the United States has enough consumer protection that anyone who were to bring a consumer fraud case against their therapist is likely to win. You have protection. It's already happened in New Jersey. It's already happened in California in a case that we represented an adult woman who sued her therapist in Berkeley, California. These are all very powerful tools. We're going to, all of us together, continue public education. We're focusing on parents. We're focusing on religious backgrounds in our partnerships. And even more recently, if anyone's watched Paris Hilton's documentary on YouTube, the Troubled Teen Program. There's Troubled Teen programs that people may not realize where conversion therapy is also happening. So there are now so many avenues for us to really take on the issue of conversion therapy, educate the public, now more than ever. And so I really hope that's a high note for people to realize the visibility to keep going, to share the message. It's there for you.
Yeah, one neat thing that I think folks might find exciting, just recently on YouTube, if you go to YouTube and you search for conversion therapy, now you get a link to Trevor's About Conversion Therapy page. So folks can learn about things that way. So we work through the laws, we work through telling stories, we work through free mom hugs, showing up at pride parades, talking to maybe other moms who are going to their first pride, don't know what's going on. But this is such a cultural movement, and there's all hands on deck, and it honestly is exciting.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Casey. All right, so we are now going to move into the Q&A session. There is a grouping of questions that is really good, so I'm going to ask them all, and I welcome any of you to respond to them. Okay, so these are the questions. What stories are effective in mobilizing those who would have supported / would not have cared about conversion? What are the regulatory changes? How have you grappled with religious exemption? If you would like for me to repeat those, I'd be happy to.
I mean, I'll take a stab at part of it, and then y'all can think about it and jump on in. I'll kind of combine the what stories are effective in mobilizing folks and a little bit with the religious exemption side of it, because I know that's a challenge. I don't like to talk about our laws as having religious exemptions, because really what we've done in crafting laws that target licensed mental health professionals, and especially those practicing on minors, is we've been able to work on the government's obligation to make sure that when it gives out a license, it gives out its seal of approval to professional psychologists, psychiatrists, etc., that licensure means something, and that it is not licensing snake oil, not licensing quacks. So this is not about creating exemptions for something. This is about fixing one active problem that the government really has an obligation to address. That said, it is correct that, some of these religious ministries and religious forms of conversion therapy may be a little bit harder to get to. And that really is the place where doing public education work matters. I am proud to be working with various different faith-based organizations right now, and talking to them about how do you connect within communities and speaking authentically, so that, like, for example, I'd be able to talk Christian to Christian with somebody, other folks would be able to talk as members of other communities. And I think that's part of what matters, is really finding messengers who can empathize with and walk patiently with folks who are all too often a little bit misguided on this, especially parents. I've so tragically seen so many people who try and put their kids into conversion therapy because they think it's the loving thing to do. They think they are caring for their family and their children the best way they can, and it's honestly misguided. But part of how you get into that and have that conversation is you go gently, you share the stories of what really happens, and you make a real connection. And I think that's honestly, it's been what we do in the LGBTQ movement for as long as that's been around, is we come out, we share our stories, and we make that real connection so that we are understood. And that's how we make progress.
I would just add, everybody has mentioned this and hit on it, but I think it's important to hammer it home as kind of an action item for each of you to take with you. It is vital that thought leaders and lawmakers and folks hear from those most affected by conversion therapy, and that very much includes survivors who are in a space where they're able to talk about their stories, but it also includes parents who've seen the harms of this. It includes medical professionals that have seen the harms of this directly. It includes members of the community, people in many ways. And one of the hard things to talk about, it includes those that have lost folks to this practice, or this so-called practice. It is so important that we continue that public education. We continue having people speak out from all walks of life and from every angle that is affected by conversion therapy. So to your question of who are the most effective are those who have directly seen the effects, whether it was done to them, whether it was done to their child, whether they treated them. Just making sure that we continue this narrative and we continue to expose the quackery and the dangers of this so-called practice.
Wonderful. Thank you, Casey and Troy.
Okay. Sorry. I was on mute. Do you mind if I add something?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, please.
There's just two things I want to add. Outside, the biggest difference we can make is when the story, let's say, comes from a parent, which I think, Katrina, why free mom hugs is so important when a mom gets involved or a father gets involved. Or a religious leader speaks out about ending conversion therapy. It's because when you are, conversion therapy is really relatable to so many people. the truth is that every family has someone LGBT in their family, and conversion therapy is so far reaching. So there is really a way to garner so much support and mobilizing more people involved in the conversation. And so when a parent shares their story, or like I said, a religious figure who is supportive of LGBTQ people, it is extremely powerful. We want more parents to share if they had put their child through conversion therapy and realized it was a mistake. We have had moms and dads do that before. Yeah, and I think those are probably the most powerful when it comes to changing hearts and minds and generating more support for a larger audience. I just want to just touch upon the regulatory changes. This is a newer way we're finding out how to end conversion therapy, which is the state regulatory boards can actually, they themselves initiate a law that would ban conversion therapy without going through the legislative process. The only state that's done that so far is Utah, where the actual boards changed their rules and regulations that you cannot do conversion therapy, and the governor signed off on it, and it becomes law. Virginia is almost done. They're going through their process, which started about a year ago, and each division of the licensing board, nursing, medicine, social workers, etc., are going through that process. North Dakota is considering that right now, and it's really become a new viable option for states if they don't want to go the legislative route. And it's powerful because it's the professionals that get to say what the evidence is, and it's a whole new route for us.
All right, thank you all. Okay, so we are now going to close. I just want to say thank you all so very much for taking the time to participate in this very critical town hall, and also thank you for doing this very important work to end this awful practice. You can find the recording of this town hall on Equality Arizona and Freedom Oklahoma's Facebook pages. And a quick note, Equality Arizona is surveying Arizonans on wellness. If you live in Arizona and would like to fill out this anonymous survey, you can do so by going to equalityarizona.org/survey. Thank you so much.